Hi, welcome to this week's Fundraising Friday. This week we're talking about diversifying your funding sources. A local nonprofit recently announced that they're going to be closing their doors in a few months. The reason? Nearly 75% of their revenue came from grant resources. Most of the balance came from an annual fundraising event. Changes in foundation priorities meant that they weren't receiving the amount of grant funding they had in the past, and a rainy weekend really hurt the receipts from their annual fundraising event. So what can your nonprofit learn from their experience? First of all, look at where your funding comes from. If you have some raised revenue or some earned income, put that into the mix as well. Where does most of your money come from? What happens if that funding source goes away? If you're totally reliant on fundraising or raised revenue, look at your top donors. What happens if your top donor goes away? How much money would you lose? What percentage? What about your top 5 donors? What if they change their priorities? What would that do to your bottom line? If more than 10% of your revenue comes from any one donor, you are way too dependent upon that donor. You need to take action now to start to diversify that funding source. Same with your top 5 donors. If you're bringing in more than 10 or 20% of your revenue from your top 5 donors, again, think about diversifying. Your board should be looking at and creating action plans for how you can become less dependent on any one donor. Second of all, be sure you're making and building relationships with those top donors so that you kind of get a feel if things are changing with them and they're changing their priorities. You want to make sure that you have very strong relationships with them. Finally, look at where your revenue comes from with special events. Bad weather weekend can really make the difference in how much your event makes. So look at where your money's coming in and how you can protect yourself so that a bad year doesn't mean that your organization goes away. That's this week's Fundraising Friday. Thanks. Have a great weekend.